Hi, welcome to Tech Field Day Extra at Interop New York 2014. We are here on site at the Javits Center talking with some of the sponsors of Interop and some of the great bloggers and influencers of the Tech Field Day community. And we thought it'd be a great opportunity to get them all in a room together and have a little delegate roundtable. Great time for you to kind of throw some ideas out there and discuss things. And to lead it off, I'm going to throw my little grenade in here. So Interop is the last great independent trade show. We all go to different shows. We Cisco Live, EMC World, VM World, but Interop was the original. It was the big show, and now it's the only show.
Well, I mean, it was the big show if you don't count Comdex.
Well, yeah. Okay.
But both, I mean, both Interop and Comdex used to fill the Las Vegas Convention Center, which is so big none of our current events even go there. That by comparison to Moscone, it's 6 times the size.
So what changed, you think, in terms of that?
First of all, there's been a lot of consolidation. I mean, when Comdex was huge, there were 27 PC makers, each of which had a 40 by 60 booth. So there's been some consolidation, but the vendors who have any power all decided not to play in the vendor independent conference world. So Cisco does Cisco Live, and EMC does EMC World, and VMware does VMworld, and Oracle does Oracle Open World, and they're all walled gardens, and all you get to see is what those vendors want you to see.
Right. They control the message pretty tightly at that point.
Well, they control they not only control the message, but they literally control who gets to exhibit. So Microsoft can't show Hyper-V at VMworld. NetApp can't have a booth at EMC World. And the conference part of the vendor-driven events is mostly education. 60 to 70% of the sessions at Vendor X World are what's new in Vendor X's product or how to use Vendor X's product. And that's training, and that's really valuable. And it lets you get deep. But we don't have any way to get broad anymore. There's no place where guys who have to build things can go and see what all the available choices are.
But maybe thinking about, because originally Interop wasn't a trade show. Interop was an opportunity for vendors and manufacturers to get together with their stuff and say, hey, let's plug all these devices in.
That's really only true for about 2 years.
Right, but the idea then became, well, hey, since we're all going to be here anyway, making this stuff work together.
Let's invite some customers and try and sell them something.
Right, but now look at it with the fact that we don't really have a lot of competing network protocols. We don't have a lot of competing storage protocols. Everything kind of all just works when you plug it in.
Well, in the beginning, Interop was really about a TCP/IP plugfest.
And now TCP/IP rules the world.
Right, and TCP/IP interoperability is assumed.
Yeah.
And so we don't need to have TCP/IP plugfests because, if you don't do interoperable TCP/IP, we will kill you.
Well, it's still very topical.
Yeah.
Even though that's mainstream TCP/IP, obviously it's mainstream, right? But it's a good point because you can bring together. I'm not a storage guy. You're a storage guy, a network guy, and and if you had some of these working sessions where you had 3 or 4 presenters, and you covered maybe picked the design and you ran through a design and covered how do you manage it, how do you automate it, how do you build it, and that way you get that general view. And some vendors may have this already, but it's still potentially biased to to their platform. But so I guess what is the answer to have that holy grail of a 2-day session or a 3-day session, what have you?
I think you inherently express the problem there. It's all so dependent on what solution you're going with. If you're going with an EMC solution, the way you lay out your storage is going to be completely different than a NetApp solution. And it's in order to paint that broad picture, some of the details have to be there as well.
And every vendor wants to have the complete story now, right? So nobody is just playing in one specific silo of the stack. They want to do everything. right? So
Yeah, they all want to be Thomas Watson's IBM. And,
right.
you know,
So VMware is a great example, right? I mean, they don't want to just do x86 virtualization because everybody can do that right now, but they want to do that plus they want to do all the storage. Now they want to do all the networking. They want to own that whole story. So they don't necessarily need to attend every other vendor's conferences because they kind of sell that as a packaged solution now.
No matter what, though, you still need more than one vendor for a complete solution. And if that includes IPAM, right? If it includes, bare metal servers, bare metal switching, whatever it is, cabling, what have you, twin act cabling, or this cabling. So no matter what, like there's still multiple things. I think this is interesting to, given again the community we have here to try to put our heads together and maybe create something awesome.
It's interesting you brought up. It's interesting you brought up some of the physical infrastructure pieces, because I find that's really a problem in the mid-market. That when your $500 million company moves, the CEO tells the CIO, build me a new data center, and the CIO goes to the operations guys and goes, build me a new data center, and those are guys who've been buying servers and storage and networking for years. And they have no idea how to buy air conditioning and UPSs and racks.
Even a racks, I was going to say.
And I did 3,500 words in 2 blog posts on network computing on cage nuts.
It's a good series, by the way. If you haven't had a chance to check out Howard's CageNet blog posts, be sure to do that.
Well, I mean, as I was writing it, it seemed ridiculous. It's like, here's 2,000 words on cage nuts, and then there was like 1,500 words on alternatives. But everybody I talked to, including other guys that come to Tech Field Day, didn't know, oh, that's what that tool was for?
Oh, that little popper thing?
The toenail clipper of death, or the little one that looks like the blank out of a PC slot.
Yeah, the spring steel one.
Yeah, half the guys I know who do cage nuts all the time are like busting their knuckles. They just don't know.
I just saw someone last week how to use one.
Yeah.
No, it's so nice.
So maybe with that, it's kind of an idea that we've been kicking around in some conversations this week. We're so focused on having specific solutions to problems. OpenStack solves this problem, or OpenFlow solves this problem, or all flash arrays solve this problem. But we're assuming a lot of knowledge is with a person when we say, well, actually the problem that you're having whenever you try to vMotion between these 2 long distance sites is X. Well, I assume that you know about WANs and latency, right, and round trip time and TCP retransmits and things like that. Could it be that a lot of the reason why education is so big at a vendor conference is because we have so many people out there that don't necessarily have that base level education that they need to understand that the little tool that comes in the cages?
Well, because the training that happens at the vendor conference isn't that level training. It's much more product training.
Right, it's not practical.
It's much more, half the sessions are, here's the new feature. Look at VMworld. There's sessions on vSAN, there's sessions on vVols, there's sessions on all the new stuff we're adding, and then there's sessions on, and then the part nobody realizes is, if you're a platinum vendor, you get X speaking slots as part of that, not just the space on the exhibit floor. And so the vendors get to do, and here's how to make VMware work with our storage system, until VMware decides that.
Could it be that the third-party conferences like Interop could kind of come back to the forefront by offering the education that's agnostic of a product?
We try.
Well, you do, but
I think perhaps what you're saying, part of what you're saying is, we need to go back to basics. We need to go back to the stuff that we did at Networld and Interop 10 years ago, and really have sessions about how to build a basic how to build a network, how TCP/IP works.
Well, it sounds like maybe the focus needs to be on the practitioners, not necessarily people who are buying, right? I mean, because these
Right.
conferences now are really just shows to try to sell you something.
Right. Well,
It's
I mean,
not necessarily,
they always have been.
but now there's no denying it. I mean,
Right.
there's no pretense that it's an educational event.
Oh no! If you talk to EMC customers, their SEs tell them which sessions they should go to at EMC World, and so it's a very directed. You have this requirement. Maybe you should be looking at this, and so if you're thinking about an all-flash array, we're going to make sure that in addition to going to the 2 sessions on the thing that you use every day that you want to know more about, we're going to send you to the extreme I/O session so you can have that Kool-Aid poured down your throat before you start looking at filling out the RFP.
One of the speakers here at Interop said that he did a 3-hour data center networking session yesterday, the day before, and after it was over with, one of the attendees, having sat through 3 hours of this, comes up to him and goes, "So this is really, really great talk. Now, what were those hypervisor things that you were talking about?"
Yeah.
You know, is that what we need to get back to? Are you getting back to basics? Is making sure that everybody kind of understands everything?
I think maybe we do. I think maybe that, we don't, that we've got a whole generation of geeks who grew up with consumer tech. I mean, certainly I'm an old guy, and when I grew up, consumer tech was color TV. That was really, I remember the first time somebody in the neighborhood got a color TV. But that's a very different world than, the guys in their late 20s who are now, moving from the help desk to IT operations. And they probably never had the kind of low-level training that we had to have because people assumed we didn't know anything because it was brand new.
I think part of it is generational. Even from from writing and blogging and things like that. As you evolve, yourself, like you forget as you write to go back to the basics. I know when I write, so it's evolved. So now, if you start reading, somebody else wrote, like you almost start at their baseline, and it's hard to get that intro back. So I almost think that your point is good, practitioners. That even when I write, like how-to guides would be beneficial, or how-to sessions. They can be short too, like how to do this and like break it down, where maybe it's not again super basic, but it's like how to configure this or how to design this, versus if you go into again, some sort of I'm a storage guy, but like session on a product or platform, you spend like 2 hours on that, and you walk out and you're like, where do you even begin to take action on what you just learned? So if there were, again, digestible chunks to do certain things, how do you automate the building of templates versus how do you automate the network? Like pick something small and concrete and then present on that like small thing.
But is part of that because a lot of people in the community, and I probably fall victim to this a lot too, we get kind of carried away and egocentric. You don't necessarily want to go back and say, well, I'm going to spend any amount of measurable time on a very simple thing that I learned how to do 10 years ago. You always want to be kind of on the cutting edge and talking about things that aren't even really products yet, right? I mean, SDN's a great example.
There's some of that, and there's some it's just easier to write in shorthand. That, if especially, I write for network computing where, there's space constraints. I can't write a 3,000 word blog post. And so I have to make assumptions about what people, if I'm going to talk about one thing, I got to assume, all the foundations that sits on top of.
But that's a know your audience issue, though, right?
Yeah.
So somebody who's going to read that article is not brand new to storage, right?
Right.
They've probably been in it for a while, and they've negotiated that common level of understanding and vocabulary, so they're not tripped up from the beginning.
Right.
That's exactly my concern, though. I mean, what is the audience of a conference? Are they people like us that have a broad depth of knowledge,
No.
or are they?
Definitely not. So I used to be on the advisory board for PC Expo and Networld, which then merged into Interop, and they then killed off the Networld part. And at Networld Boston, the most popular track every year for 7 years was the beginner's track.
Well, I mean, that goes back to put it in Cisco's light, it's like a network engineer. All the money is in the CCNA books, right?
Right.
That is their
There's 10,000 people who want to understand things. There's 10,000 people who take the 100 level class, and then that's all they need to know.
Yeah.
And then there's 2,000 people who go on and take the 200 level class, and we're all sitting here going, "Yeah, we need more 600 level classes."
Yeah.
And that's just us preaching to the choir, that talking to each other.
Yeah.
And so we forget there's always people entering the business. There's always people who are and the majority of people are 3 to 5 years behind the technology, and so you got to keep teaching people how to use the technology that's 4 years old, because many of them that's new to them.
It's basically like if we were to view it almost as a college or university, like how would we build the curriculum for, you can say IT, you can say data center infrastructure,
Right.
That would be interesting to see if you were to break that up into, bite-sized chunks on what that would look like in terms of, classes, prezos, how-tos, labs, things like that. And, and if you cover physicals, right, facilities, even throw it in there, right, technology.
Right. Oh yeah, no, I mean, I've been doing a series of blog posts on the physical just because I know people don't know that stuff.
That's pretty clever, though, right? Because if you think about, a college student, you're required to take some number of very basic classes in multiple disciplines. It doesn't matter what your major is going to be, right? So you still have to take some degree of writing or some degree of math or some degree of physics, right? So maybe the same kind of thing is really what we're getting at here is it doesn't matter if you want to be a WAN guy. You're going to have to do some virtualization. You're going to have to do some storage. You're going to have to do, probably even some help desk kind of stuff to have that broader understanding so that you can be more specialized in your field later on.
Yeah, and it helps too. It's like, as a network guy learning voice for a little bit, just look at call control, how it happens, and analogies back to open flow and networks, things getting punted to a controller, if you will, to see what can be done. And, I think you get more ideas too, better things come out of that process the more you learn and the more topics you get, exposed to.
Well, there's also the whole aspect of it's one thing to learn how to do something, it's another thing to understand how to apply that, right? And I think I was talking to a couple of the guys yesterday about talking about Docker and Vagrant, because they were two things I looked at recently, hadn't played with them before, and so I looked at Docker and went, okay, I can download it, I can get it running, I can expose a port, I can map storage, now what? So I got a container running and it runs a different version of Ubuntu to the one that's hosting it. Okay, next. It turns out there's actually, based on brief research, there's actually not an awful lot out there. Those 101 steps again of saying, hey, here's a cool application of this. Maybe here's something you could do with this. Maybe try this. Here's why this is a benefit. Here's how you deploy this as a distributed system. And Vagrant was the same. It's like I can learn what it does. I can install it. I can spin up a VM and go, woo, I've got a VM. And again, it's like, then what? Right. And that's almost the learning gap. When I look out there, I realize that particularly with those newer technologies, there's a lot of people who lead you right up the door and go, yeah, OpenStack is the way forward, OpenFlow is the thing, and then you're just left to go apparently magically know how to do OpenFlow or know how to do Open Daylight or whatever it is, and there's nothing that says, look, hold your hand through this. Because once you get it, you'll get it, but until then... So I think there's definitely a learning gap that... bloggers are actually pretty well placed to fill. There's probably a book in it for someone too, but it's moving so fast, I'm not so sure. But I'd love to see more of those kind of things that really, I try and write some of them when I can, that really try and fill those gaps.
Yeah.
But if you tried to have a conference with that type of material as kind of the front and center, courses that were available, who would fund that conference? Right? Because these things have got to be expensive to put on.
Well, we're back again to who attends conferences. Like, what's the motivation to attend Interop? Who comes to this? Are people coming for training?
Is a conference the right venue? How about the old Cisco Now van? What if this was like a mobile thing that had emerging technologies, or it could be, maybe there's two vans. One emerging, we talked about earlier, had Docker, Vagrant, all these things, SDN, ACL, and it had independence on this van. Another van was around, all right, maybe how to do this, how to get started, and that way it's mobile. They come to you, maybe for commercials. I don't know, bro. Thinking out loud.
The fact is, the industry independent events were trade shows. The dog is upstairs. The conference downstairs is the tail, because the money is mostly coming from the exhibitors. And when you look at a vendor-driven event, it's more half and half, that half the money's coming out of that vendor's marketing budget because they're trying to make sure that once you're their customer, you understand their stuff so well that you won't look at any of the competitors because you don't know that. And then part of it comes off the exhibit floor. And almost everybody gets a discount of some sort. If you're a customer, almost everybody gets a discount of some sort on the badge. It's like, yeah, that badge is $1,500. But I would guess 20% of the people actually pay $1,500 cash for it.
I actually want to branch into a new topic that John just brought up that kind of is something interesting that I've been hearing a lot recently, and it's around the idea of use cases. And so, we as technology people have spent a lot of our lives, learning protocols, learning OSPF, learning fiber channel, learning how to do something. But we didn't spend a lot of our time learning why we're doing it. Why am I building out a fully redundant, fiber channel array, or why do I have to run, this particular routing protocol? To us, it's a bit of a gap in the engineering side of things, because SDN is a perfect example. OpenFlow this, or STT that, and then when we go to try to talk to normal people about it, they're like, I don't get it.
Well, it's funny because I'm in the I don't get it, because I don't understand the technology till I see a use case.
So it should be as
It doesn't really make any sense. It doesn't really make any sense to me till I see what problem it solves. And so Docker. It's like I look at Docker and I go, that solves problems I don't have. That server virtualization solves the problems I have better than developing than application virtualization and making it more granular. But that's because those are the problems I have. And if you're really working in industry, you're trying to solve problems. And so I look at OpenFlow and I go, that's a solution to problems I don't have. I don't have more than 4,000 VLANs.
But isn't this along the lines of the discussion we had earlier about the difference between an engineer and a consultant, right? And the consultant who's, if you're a traditional engineer, you typically don't like consultants, right? Because you look at them as kind of fluff, and they're not actually delivering a serious thing, right? They're just doing a lot of talking. But the finer point to that is a consultant can help somebody ask the right question. So instead of trying to just implement some technology that you heard, like Docker, for example,
Right. Well,
they might say, well, what is it you think that Docker is going to do for you?
What are you trying to achieve?
yeah,
Right.
as a long time consultant, let me say the questions are really important, and you have to listen to what people say, and figure out, are they asking how, are they asking what, are they asking when, and sometimes they're asking how do I implement this technology, when they really should be asking, what technology should I implement to solve this problem? The business people, once they see that there is some solution, will frequently come to IT and say, we want to implement this solution, when they really should be saying, well, you guys know more about this than we do. Here's the problem. What solution should we use for it?
Well, I'll bet you've had people come to you for advice before and say, hey, how can I make such and such do this, but I need it to do that other thing as well, and I can't use this thing. And you rack your brains for a few minutes going, oh, God, it's going to be complicated. Then you're like, hold on, what exactly are you trying to do here?
Right.
Exactly.
Oh, I needed it to do that. Oh, there's a module for that.
Yeah.
Right. But people can taught themselves based on what they know.
Yes.
Right? They stick with what they know, and they'll try and twist every last thing out of it, not realizing if they were able to step back again and start looking down all the paths, they'd realize there was a well-worn path in the direction they already want to go, and it's not this convoluted thing they've buried themselves into.
Yeah, we can either spend $4 million on software, or you can send an email.
Or we can put in a 10 gigabit per second Ethernet link, or we could FedEx a box of tapes once a month.
That was actually, it was an interesting use case that Level 3, I believe, was talking about it with Netflix. It's like, listen, we can prove that Netflix isn't slowing down in our network, and here's the traffic graphs to prove it. And what we need to do is we need to hook up these two routers and create a cross connect. We'll go buy a 3-foot Ethernet cable if that's what it takes, guys. It's looking at things at a higher level, and maybe that's the step from being an architect, or I'm sorry, being an engineer to an architect, to being that higher level. Taking a look at things like that is to say, I understand how all of these solutions fit into the greater scheme of things, as opposed to just saying, well, I have an OSPF hammer, so every routing problem looks like a nail now.
Right. Well, that exactly. It's like you learn how to use a hammer. Every screw looks like something that should be put in with a hammer from then on.
Yeah.
Right. And so something. So you mentioned earlier this idea of needing to see the solution. You need to see the use case in order to understand it. We were talking in a similar analogy in some ways yesterday about how do you teach people how to do stuff, and it was the cooking analogy, right? Of show someone the finished product, then go back and show them how to make it, and oh look, here's a finished product. In some ways, it's the same thing. It's show you the use
Right.
case. When you say, yes, that's something I'd like to learn how to do, I can use that. Now back up and show them the steps to get there.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, till I understand the need, the solution just isn't that interesting.
But otherwise, you're going to have people that are fixated on, flour and eggs and milk,
Oh, yeah.
whatever it is, and trying to do stuff with that because they've heard that flour and eggs are pretty cool. And those software-defined eggs,
Software-defined eggs.
I'm just thinking of what hatches from software-defined eggs.
chickens as a service, probably.
Maybe a little bit more casada.
See, and I was expecting bacon.
Software-defined bacon?
All right, so I think we've successfully solved all the world's problems today. I love it when we do that. That's what Tech Field Day is all about. It's about solving everyone's problems.
I think we did.
All right. Well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap this roundtable up. I want to thank each and every one of you for participating. Your opinions are always welcome, and we love to put those out there. If you'd like to see more roundtable videos like this, as well as all the other videos that we produced here at Interop New York 2014, be sure to check us out at techfieldday.com.